Now, Boris Johnson has reignited his feud with Rishi Sunak by calling one of his flagship policies absolutely nuts. The Prime Minister wants to increase the minimum age, of course, for buying tobacco every year in an effort to phase out smoking. But it's fair to say Boris isn't impressed.
Look at some of the things that we're doing now. I think that are being done in the name of conservatism. I think they're absolutely nuts. And banning cigars. And what is? I mean, maybe you all think that's a great idea. I just can't see what is the point of banning? Well, the party of Winston Churchill wants to ban. I mean, donnez-moi un break, as they say in Quebec. You know, it's just mad.
Well, it had everything. It had Winston Churchill, a little bit of franglais thrown in at the end there. And I'm joined now by the political commentator, Benedict Spence. Benedict, welcome to the show. Benedict, Boris on very, very good form as ever. But Chris Hope, our political editor, earlier on was saying there's no coincidence in this because there could be a revolt on this tobacco bill next week. And Boris Johnson is leading the charge on this from over the Atlantic.
Well, quite right, too. I mean, it is sort of slightly extraordinary that we exist in a very strange time where, on the one hand, we're sort of edging towards prohibition on tobacco, but many people are also sort of pushing forward the idea of legalizing narcotics like marijuana. And, you are sort of wondering, where are we going to end up in a situation where our society effectively outlaws the use of tobacco products, but things like marijuana are effectively decriminalised and are absolutely fine? Certainly, if you walk around many of our major cities, police don't respond to people using all manner of drugs. Do we really think that there's going to be sort of any massive benefit, therefore, to banning tobacco? I would have thought not, because eventually what will happen is that the trade will just be taken over by the same criminal gangs that have profited off drugs. But I think it's a really salient point, actually. We all have a bit of a laugh when Boris talks about, Churchill and cigars and all that sort of thing, and, ho, 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 isn't it amusing? But it's an interesting point, isn't it? Because actually, when we're talking about what are the dangers around tobacco products causing cancer, lung cancer, that sort of thing, cigars make up a fraction, a very tiny proportion of the amount of tobacco products that are smoked. And broadly speaking, actually, they're probably far less likely to cause you to have some sort of cancer than cigarettes are because of the nature of how it is that you ingest them. And as the United States has found out, if you can put limits on cigars from, say, Cuba, that doesn't mean that the sorts of people who are likely to smoke cigars are going to have problems getting around those rules. It's a nonsensical proposal, I think.
But Benedict, what about the main event here? And that is, irrespective of its cigars, Winston Churchill, smoking or defence, Boris Johnson is putting the boot into Rishi Sunak. How helpful or not is that?
At this moment in time, I mean, this is just entirely my perspective. I don't think that Rishi Sunak has a prayer of leading the Conservatives to a respectable general election result. That could, of course, change, but where we're currently sitting, I don't think that's very likely. I think, therefore, it is not unhealthy to have a sort of a different pole, if you like, within the Conservative Party to proffer other ideas, a different way of doing things, if anything, just to try to nudge Rishi Sunak in a slightly more favourable direction. And whatever you might think of Boris Johnson, there is certainly a cohort within the Tory party that does look back wistfully and think, well, wouldn't it have been wonderful if we still had him? Right now, none of the actual sitting Tory MPs, nobody is prepared to put their head above the parapet and say, yes, I'd make a good alternative leader. So if it therefore falls to former prime ministers, be it David Cameron on foreign policy or Boris Johnson from across the sea, to say, actually, look, this is nuts, the electorate don't necessarily want it, why are you doing this? That seems to be the best we have right now.
Yeah, totally agree. Benedict Spence, always a pleasure. Boris Johnson acting like the leader over the water. Rishi Sunak, well, no doubt smoke is coming out of his ears. Benedict Spence, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for joining us.